Recently, I was at the Registry of Motor Vehicles with a friend of mine, and we were getting our paperwork for our driver's permits. I was surprised that along with the hundreds of questions about driving, there was also a little checkoff box for pre-voter registration. So I turned to my friend and asked, "Hey, are you going to pre-register to vote?" But he just scoffed at me and said, "No, why bother?" And this was shocking to me because this friend of mine was the smartest kid I knew. So why wasn't he voting? And then I started to wonder, if he was apathetic, how many other young people are disengaged? It made me think, what would happen if the next generation, my generation, didn't uphold the mantle of democracy? Today, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to talk to you about the Constitution of the United States, the responsibility that each generation has to keep democracy alive, and what we must do to ensure our functioning republic for the years to come. But first, why is learning about our Constitution so important? After all, American democracy has already survived for over 2 centuries. Well, as we may know, a democracy is of and by the people. This requires well-informed and involved citizens exercising their rights to self-government. And since the beginning, each generation of American leaders has understood that each generation of Americans has required training and education in order to become effective citizens. And with the privileges of liberty comes the responsibility to pass the baton to the next generation. George Washington recognized this when he said, "A primary objective should be the education of the youth in the science of government. What duty is more pressing than communicating it to the future guardians of the liberties of the country?" Ladies and gentlemen, let's be frank. There's a lot at stake. Before the Constitution, there was no freedom of speech, freedom of the press, no right to peacefully protest the government. Religious minorities were persecuted, your land could be seized on a whim of those in power, and you had no right to a trial by jury. There were no checks or limits on governmental control. You were powerless. Yet, when our founders broke away from the tyranny of Great Britain, they sought to create a completely new form of government. And beginning with "we the people," the preamble of the Constitution asserts the premise that all men are created equal. And just as the Constitution created a new country, the United States of America, it also created a new people, Americans. Our country was built on the radical belief that everyone is bestowed with inalienable rights. You see, the Constitution does not give rights. It protects the rights that are born within all of us. And as the supreme law of the land, the first 3 articles of the Constitution define the interdependent relationships of the 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, judicial. But just as important, if not more so, the Constitution limits federal power. Federal power is limited in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, and this is corroborated in the 10th Amendment, which states, "The powers not delegated by the Constitution to the United States, nor prohibited to it by the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people." The founders had learned their lessons well from the tyranny of British rule. Article 5, as well as the Bill of Rights, have provided an essential flexibility throughout the times, through war and peace, hardships and prosperity, and this document still lives with us to this very day. From when we go to vote, serve on a jury, celebrate a religious holiday, or protest a politician's agenda. The Constitution sets the guidelines for so many activities that we hold dear to this very day. Yet maintaining our Constitution hasn't always been easy. There have always been threats since its inception. In the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, circumventing the criminal justice system. In the 1950s, mere accusations of communist sympathies were enough for people to lose their jobs and sometimes their freedom. And in the 2000 presidential election of Bush versus Gore, a clear winner could not be determined in the state of Florida, potentially undermining the peaceful transition of power. All of these crises put tremendous stress on the Constitution's strength. Yet, when the values of the document were fought for and defended, the people's rights were upheld. The Constitution is not antiquated or outdated, yet it is not self-implementing. Chief Justice Roberts is not going to show up in your neighborhood to make sure that voting rights are upheld. For the laws and responsibilities of the document to live on, it is we, the people, who must keep it alive. So the question is, how are we doing today? Is my generation ready to carry that baton forward? Well, let's take a look at one of the biggest constitutional debates happening right now on American college campuses, the debate over freedom of speech. According to the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, over half of American college campuses have severely restrictive policies which clearly prohibit protected speech. Guest speakers have been canceled. Policies have been enacted that ban certain ideas, and free speech zones have been erected on campus, implying that there are places on campus where speech is not protected under the Constitution. Take the case of Robert Van Tunen, a student from California. Robert was passing out copies of a well-known historical document, but a police officer approached him and said that he was in violation of campus rules, no distributing material outside the free speech zone. But what was this contraband historical document, you may ask? Robert was passing out copies of the Constitution in celebration of Constitution Day, in appreciation of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right for people to peaceably assemble. All these rights, which are guaranteed by the Constitution, were trampled on that day. So where are the throngs of students rushing to Robert's defense, demanding their constitutional rights to freedom of speech, carrying the baton? Well, many of them are in physics class or algebra 2. And while these are perfectly good fields of study, national programs like Race to the Top and No Child Left Behind, while excellent programs, have diverted tremendous resources from teaching civics. According to research conducted by Tufts University, while every state requires a math and reading exam to graduate, only 9 even offer an optional exam in civics. Defining our national educational priorities is like renovating an old house. Yes, we need expansion and modernization, but we also need a strong foundation upon which to lay these new bricks. If the foundation isn't strong, the house will fall. Benjamin Franklin once said, "He who would undo the liberties of a nation must begin by subduing freeness of speech." Imagine if we accept limits on our First Amendment rights. What could come next? When crime is high, limit the Fifth Amendment, due process. Hey, maybe they're guilty. Fourth Amendment search and seizure? Who needs it? We'd catch a lot more criminals without it. Privacy? Who cares if Google or Amazon record what you say, track where you go, know what you buy, report it to Uncle Sam? Anyone is able to speak out against it. Is that really that big a deal? Yes, it is. Because do you recognize the country I just described to you? No, this is not the America that we love. And this is certainly not the America that our brave men and women in the military fight to defend every day. Look, my friend didn't want to vote, but let's not give up on him. I know I won't. For nearly 228 years, the Constitution has defended our American way of life. But unless we teach the next generation, my generation, these rights will erode, and we may lose the very essence of what makes America American: freedom, liberty, justice for all. We, the people, requires all of us. It's our responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, the baton is now in our hands. The future of our country depends on it.